Hello everyone, how's it going? So Mario and Luigi Brothership. Now, I'm a huge fan of this franchise. When Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga came out, I played that game from start to finish. It was one of the most captivating games I ever played as a kid, mainly because I loved Super Mario RPG when it came out on the Super Nintendo. I never beat the game. It would be years until I actually got the game through Wii's eShop that I would actually beat the game. And it was just one of those times where I was like, why didn't they ever make another Mario RPG? Of course, it was an issue with Square Enix, Nintendo, and a lot of other legal things. But then the Mario and Luigi series came out, and it was absolutely spectacular. Unfortunately, at the end of the road, Alpha Dream, who headed this franchise, unfortunately closed down. They wanted Nintendo to rescue them. I'm not really sure why they didn't, but they closed down. But the new company that's responsible for this franchise, they do have Alpha Dream employees who worked on the franchise. A lot of people like myself were super excited for this game. Now, I played it to completion. I didn't 100% it, but I would say I 95% it the game. Like, I'm not 100%. I'm like 95% through the 100%. But regardless, IGN's review, they gave it a 5 out of 10, and a lot of people tossed a lot of crap at them. I do work for IGN through a freelance sense, but at the same time, you have to also understand that each review is written by a different person. Someone who's, for example, a sports fanatic will have a different take on a Madden game than someone who is an RPG fanatic like myself for this type of game. So now that I have full context about this game, played it through, I'm going to read through this review and see if the person actually gave it a fair shot. So let's see down here. If you've been living under a rock for the last year and craving a Mario RPG, then I've got some good and bad news. The good news is that Nintendo has put out 3 of them in the last 12 months, including the fantastic remakes of Super Mario RPG and Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. The bad news is that Mario & Luigi Brothership, the only fully original adventure so far in this plumber's role-playing renaissance, is easily the worst of the bunch, and an incredibly frustrating return for the series I hold dear. Apart from its action-packed turn-based battles, it fails in almost every way to recapture the magic of the best Mario and Luigi games, while also clinging to their bad habits like ridiculously chatty dialogue, overbearing hand-holding, and boring runtime pattern fetch quests. Couple that with shockingly bad performance issues, and that distracts at nearly every turn, and nearly 10-year wait for a brand new Mario & Luigi game has hardly felt worth it by the time the credits roll. Now, he really went deep into the game. Now, I can say, yeah, the performance does chug, especially when you're in the hub area. When you're on Ship-Shape Island, the performance really chugs when there are a lot of character models in the game, especially when you get to the after credits of the game where everyone's on the island. Yeah, it is noticeable. It goes down to 15 to 10 frames per second. It still shocks me considering games like Xenoblade Chronicles and Super Mario Odyssey, which are vastly graphically intense games, can run pretty well on this console, but this game cannot. It's also the same issue I had with Princess Peach Showtime. I don't know if Nintendo is rushing out these games because it seems quite alarming that their flagship characters are being given this type of treatment because, again, with Princess Peach Showtime, there were noticeable performance issues, and with this game, there were really bad performance issues. And I do agree with them that there are a lot of fetch quest and padding quest. There are a lot of things in this game that could have been whittled down to such a dramatic degree. It could have reduced the game by at least 10 hours. Like, by the time I would say I got to 95% completion, I was like at 80-hour mark. That seems rather ridiculous for a Mario and Luigi game. For a Persona game or a Final Fantasy game, that's pretty expected. But for a game like this, I would expect at most for like 100% would be like 50, 60 hours. But by the time I reached the final boss for the just core campaign, granted I was doing every side mission on the way, I was at the 70-hour mark and about 80 hours when I got to 95% because I kept just exploring and seeing what I can get out of this game. But yeah, a lot of what he said is true. Having the Mario Bros. Sail on a giant ship hybrid to uncover the new and explore new islands is a great idea on paper, but in practice, navigation boils down to a pretty unspectacular ocean map where you pick the next destination you want to sail to and wait as you inch your way there, and the results are ultimately meaningless. I never felt any sense of discovery remotely approaching that of The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker, or even the small open ocean segments of Paper Mario The Origami King. I instead felt like a kid in a backseat on a road trip, just wondering if we were there yet. Now, he is right about this, but I get what they were trying to do. Now, in the first part of the game, your ship is slow, like dead slow, like think walking speed. And the idea is that you will go and complete side content while your ship goes there, like it's on autopilot, like you're playing World of Warcraft and you hit the side button on your mouse and your mount flies to the destination while you surf the web on your second monitor or screen. That's what they were going for. And even when you get the boost speed enhancement, which allows your ship to go much faster, it does stop when you get to a location that's unknown. But yeah, they do tell you where everything is, more or less. Like there are currents that you follow in order to find the location that you need to go. So there isn't a sense of discovery like with The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker, which, interesting to note, that game used to scare me as a kid because, you know, when the squid comes out of the ocean, I was just like, what else is down there? And that's why I can't play games like Subnautica. But regardless, he is right about this, and you don't get the fast travel system until you get to the post-endgame, and it is pretty dire when it gets there. But regardless, he does have a lot of really good points here. If they made it like The Wind Waker, I kind of would have preferred that because you would have had more avenue for exploration, but I guess they couldn't really do that with the RPG mechanics with this game. Like, with an action-adventure game like The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, I can see that, but with an RPG game, I'm pretty sure you would run into instances where you would go into an area and you would just be like, I can't do anything here because I'm too low level. Like, the pacing when it comes to leveling in Brothership is really good, but when it comes to the pacing of going from point A to point B in terms of the narrative story, it's not great. Speaking of kids, several choices in Brothership make it feel like baby's first RPG. It probably will be plenty of kids out there, so that it isn't inherently a bad thing, but this is a rare game starring Mario that feels designed specifically for ages 6 to 12 rather than ages 6 to 66. The tutorials and dialogue are constantly holding your hand. For example, almost any time you enter a new area, the camera slowly pans over to your objective and slowly pans back, followed by an excruciatingly long explanation for your new assistant named Snoutlet, who basically spells out exactly what you need to do. The dialogue repeatedly reminds you of overarching story and dialogue, and Brothership spends far too much time in its already 34-hour runtime rehashing the same tired notes. I guess 34 hours is because he maybe rushed through the story. Like, you have to remember with these types of reviews, they have to get through the game almost immediately, because I've had review copies given to me in the past. I still do sometimes. And the amount of time they give you for completing a game is usually about 4 to 5 days before the game comes out. And that's if you're lucky. Like, sometimes they'll give you a week ahead, but like most of the time you'll get it 48 hours before the game comes out, at least from my experience. Maybe people who are much more higher in the totem pole will get it a week beforehand, but for me personally, I would be lucky if I got it at least 24 to 48 hours before the game came out. So I guess they rushed through it. I'm not really sure, but for me, I reached around 60 hours before I got to the credit screen, and then I still played more in order to get like 95% of the game. I lost count of how many times the new characters were shocked to learn Mario and Luigi were on a mission to reconnect all of Concordia's islands, plus the large font means only roughly a dozen worlds can top or fit a single dialogue bubble, so you're always mashing A to get to the next line of insufferable long scenes. I do agree with this. Like, almost every time, the dialogue always repeats itself. Now, I get what they're going for here. Like, most of the characters seem unaware of what's going on. And I would say only towards the end of the game do, like, actual stakes start being hammered into the populace. For the most part, no one seems to notice anything wrong is happening. Like, they're going off into their days, like, almost like the government knows something dire is happening right now, but no one else is aware of it. Like, I think that in that regard, it makes sense for the average person that you interact with in this game's world would not know what the heck is going on. Like, the worlds aren't connected? You mean that you're here to connect our worlds again? Like, I can understand that they wouldn't be aware of it, but it also doesn't help the fact that you always go through the same chain of dialogue over and over again. Hey, Mario and Luigi's here. Hey, we have to reconnect the lighthouse. Hey, we have to do it all over again. So he is absolutely right about the fact that they do pad out a lot of the dialogue in this game. But the thing is, during the final post-launch of the game, like when you beat the first main bad guy before the real main bad guy comes along, the game takes a steep learning curve, I would say. Like when he says it's really easy, I disagree with that. Like I would say it's not as hard as Mario and Luigi Inside Bowser's Story. And the game does have an easy mode, but only if you fail multiple times. Like I failed multiple times with the final boss. And there is an easy mode that unlocks like if you die 3 or 4 times, where your characters get stronger and the enemies do far less damage. But you can't put that on permanently. But as a game that's very easy, I think this guy's probably just really good at time-based mechanics, because when it comes to the Mario and Luigi games, it's not about offense, it's about defense. And if you can maximize your timing for each attack when it comes to defensive purposes, you can steamroll through the enemies. Like there's some enemies that, especially bosses, that can do like 3 or 4 consecutive attacks. Now there are rare exceptions where you can't counterattack the enemy, but for the most part, if you're really good at rhythm-based games and like you have actual rhythm, not like me, which I don't, so that's why it's a bit harder for me, you can basically one-shot this game, especially when you get the late game abilities and the late game plugs, which are like these bonus stats that give you increased damage, reduced damage, perfect alignment for your bros attacks. So I can see that this game could be insanely easy for some other people. But other Mario and Luigi games also had very hard modes embedded into the games. Like I remember Dream Team did. Like there was a hard mode where you can only carry a certain amount of items and enemies were far more aggressive. So I can see both sides. Like maybe they'll add a hard mode. You never know. I would be more forgiving of the overwhelming amount of text if the humor and the story were on point, but unfortunately the writing doesn't land. The Mario RPGs all attempt to strike humorous and whimsical tones to varying degrees of success, but Brothership's comedy mostly lies in repetitive bits and intentionally unfunny puns and dad jokes, where the punchline is watching Mario and Luigi stare blankly in awkward silence. I think what he's referencing are these radish guys. They're these old grandpa radish characters that you pull out of the ground, and they tell these very boring jokes, and that's kind of the joke. Like they tell a joke that's so whatever, that Mario and Luigi just look at it, and then a little wind pattern comes along. So yeah, I can see that. Like there is a lot of that, and after a while I just kept clicking A to get to the next section, because they are pretty bad, because as he stated earlier in the review, it is very padded. And yeah, he's not wrong about that. It is pretty padded when it comes to a lot of the dialogue stuff. Schnottlet's primary joke is telling everyone he meets them he's definitely not a pig. Yeah, he says that a lot. While the main villain but is not remembering anyone's name, who is another unfunny joke that's beaten into the ground well before Brothership stops returning to it. Again, this game lasts for dozens of hours, and these jokes never evolve or get any better. They are absolutely right about that. I wouldn't say it doesn't get better. I'll say more or less they do the same thing over and over. It's almost like Alien Romulus with the dad jokes from Andy. Like eventually you're just you heard them all and they just repeat. I do feel like they should have refreshed the write-in dialogue and cut a lot of stuff. Like I felt like they were so proud of their work that they needed to add so much stuff, because there's clearly a pacing issue with this game, and I don't know if it's the director of the game or a lot of people just were so proud of their work that they just didn't want to cut anything, because it definitely feels that way, that they just really didn't want to cut anything. Brothership makes an admirable attempt in telling a story about the importance of friendship and connections and the dangers of isolation, but it's another area where the idea is better off than the execution. The writing is just so unoriginal, and I didn't get attached to any Brothership's large cast in the same way that I have for many characters and partners from past Mario RPGs. Some of them may come down to character design. I love how Mario and Luigi look at this cartoony art style, and many of the enemies look great too, but the friendly power outlet shaped residents of Concordia just didn't resonate with me. Granted, it's nice to see original characters back in Mario and Luigi games after Paper Jam codified everything, and these designs are just a bit more rudimentary for my taste, and their blocky look clashes with the style of Mario Luigi and the other characters and enemies from Mario Mushroom Kingdom that don't show up. I actually disagree with this. I feel like this is just personal taste. Again, it is a review, but I felt like they matched well with Mario and Luigi's design. They were shaped after Outlast, so they all have like blocky textures to them. A lot of the characters and enemies are based off like electrical appliances, so they always meant to kept that theme together. And I also like the idea that it's a different region of a different world. So their entire world would be fashioned differently from what Mario and Luigi's world is. A great example to me would be Super Mario Sunshine. A lot of people don't take notice of this, but a lot of the creatures that are in Super Mario Sunshine are based off the Mushroom Kingdom, but they have a different design to them. Like, similar to how the Pokemon Company designed the Pokemon from Sun and Moon. They were designed with the idea that they evolved differently. So I like the idea in Super Mario Sunshine how these creatures that were present in the Mushroom Kingdom evolved differently in Super Mario Sunshine in Isle Delfino. So in this world, I like the idea that they decide, hey, this is the design of this world. We're not going to try and match it with the Mushroom Kingdom. This is Concordia, which I think is a good design. All the islands you visit are very generic too, with familiar fire, ice, and desert settings you've seen a dozen times before, each backed by music that's solid but honestly forgettable and probably won't be topping the charts in Nintendo's new music app. For the series that once had microscopic versions of Mario and Luigi roaming around Bowser's internal organs, Brothership feels disappointing, safe, and hardly worth exploring. I do agree with that to an extent. Like, they are right that the worlds don't feel that distinct. Like, they feel like they could belong in the Mushroom Kingdom. And I also do agree with the musical score. Like, that's something I do agree with. Like, when it comes to the Mario and Luigi games, the music in these games are absolutely masterpieces, in my opinion. They don't get the recognition that they rightfully deserve. Like, I still actively listen to a lot of the soundtrack. To me, Inside Bowser Story's final boss and Paper Jam's final boss themes are one of the best musical scores in Nintendo's library, but they all have incredible themes. Dream Team's battle theme with Luigi is absolutely stellar, but I would agree that he does have a lot of good points. Like, I am agreeing with a lot of things he says in this review, but I feel like he's being incredibly harsh because even though the worlds are not really original, they're still well designed. Like, when you get into a town, you feel like it's a town. People talk to one another, they acknowledge one another, they interact with one another in a way so they feel like an actual town. So it's much better than Final Fantasy XVI's designs of towns, I would say that. So I feel like he's being too harsh because I do feel like while they're not original, they're still very well designed. Like, each world has its own alignment of puzzles, different enemies, unique environments for the area. They may not be original, but they work. The whole adventure would pop more if it didn't run so badly. This is easily one of the worst performing Nintendo games on Switch, worse than Link's Awakening, but not quite the level of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. With incessant frame rate issues while exploring the overworld, Brothership chugs and stutters basically anytime there's sort of environmental element present, whether it's moving water, lava, sand, wind, or fog. That's pretty much a problem for the quest set entirely on an ocean. I disagree with this. Like, the only time I saw the performance really chug is when there were too many character models on screen. Everything else ran perfectly. Battles ran perfectly. The load screens were a bit much because every time you get into a load screen, it feels like it takes too long. But I disagree. Like, the only time was when I was on the main hub, Ship-Shape Island, and there were too many character models around. Other than that, I didn't notice any other performance issues. That was the only performance issues I ever had. So, maybe it's his Switch. Maybe his Switch is very old, or maybe he's using like a very high definition TV. Maybe that's causing an issue. I don't know, but I think he's being way too extreme with this because I've seen a streamer I follow play Link's Awakening, and I didn't see any noticeable issues with that game. But, you know, I didn't play Link's Awakening personally, and I never played Pokemon Scarlet and Violet after I saw the reviews of the performance issues. So I do disagree with it. It's not bad. Like I said, Xenoblade Chronicles and Super Mario Odyssey run very well on the Switch, so I don't get what the hell is going on with Nintendo right now about their, quality assurance, but it didn't run as bad as this guy is saying. It's not only unpleasant to look like, it It's not only unpleasant to look at, it can cause issues during some platforming segments that require proficiently timed jumps. Performance is more reliable during the smaller amount of time you're inside a dungeon or building. I noticed the frame rate wasn't quite as bad when playing in handheld mode, but it was looking forward to the but if you were looking forward to a Mario and Luigi series finally making a jump to a home console, I'm sorry to report that it simply didn't enjoy playing Brothership on my television and I don't recommend it. Again, I disagree with this because I played both on handheld and on my main monitor, which is a 1080p screen, and I didn't notice this many problems. Like, the only real issue I noticed about the time was the hammer mini game where you have to hit a bomb like with between Mario and Luigi. It has to be perfectly timed and you have to do that 100 times. That's the only time where I found like the performance did affect it because you just didn't have that solid frame rate in order to time the hits. But other than that, I didn't notice any issues when it came to gameplay, situations. Like the dancing mini game required you to be precise with all your inputs. Like, it's very quick, and I didn't notice any issues. Again, I could be wrong, but because of, different switches. I used the base model switch just to put it into context. Like, this is the switch I use. It's the Animal Crossing Special Edition, but it's like the baseline one. It's not an OLED one or the light one, but take that for what it is. Luigi takes an L. As a longtime fan of the series, though, I would have been able to tolerate a lot of technical roughness if it meant I was getting what I came for. Brothership isn't outright bad in a vacuum, but it's particularly disappointing because it fundamentally misunderstands the base elements of its own series. Specifically, it's how it completely mishandles Luigi. In the past, Mario and Luigi Adventures, Luigi follows right behind his older brother, and you perform and solve puzzles with the two of them as a unit. A to jump as Mario and B to jump as Luigi. When they split up, you seamlessly swap back and forth between the two. In Brothership's other overworld, though, Luigi feels more like an NPC ally than a second protagonist. He follows Mario as a disconnected, awkward distance. He can't jump on his own without the press of a button, and many puzzles revolve around simply ordering Luigi to automatically do something for you. This approach is no worse than follower characters in other RPGs, but it loses the unique style of previous games as feels so watered down as a result. I've heard wish-washy things about this. Honestly, I see what they were going for. They were trying to make Luigi more independent, I would say, but I was disappointed with the fact you couldn't swap between Mario and Luigi. Like, in older Mario and Luigi games, you can swap between Mario or Luigi taking the lead. Another issue that I did notice that I'm sure he probably mentions it later in the review is for some reason when you select an action with Luigi, you press A instead of B. For those who don't know, in these games, B is always dedicated to Luigi, even when he's selecting an attack, and A is dedicated to Mario. Because of this issue, I've missed a lot of jumps or caused a lot of issues in combat because, it's very annoying. As someone who's played all the other Mario and Luigi games except for Partners in Time, I didn't play that because I couldn't afford it as a kid. But regardless, yeah, I can understand where he's coming from. Luigi does feel like an NPC who just follows you around, but at the same time, I do feel like it makes him more independent because there are a lot of gameplay elements that follow with Luigi thinking about a solution to take advantage of a boss fight or learning about how to solve a puzzle situation. So I guess they tried to maybe test both features and they decided to go with this. I feel like him being more like this way makes things a little easier in the way that they have more elaborate puzzles of how Luigi can interact with it. Like there is a seesaw puzzle where Luigi's on one side, Mario's on another, and you have to find a way to get to a higher height so you can jump down and toss Luigi to another area. Or another one where you have to go through numerical order by hitting panels. So I can see what he's saying, but I don't think that it's extreme as he's stating. Luigi still plays a major role throughout the game. In fact, he's fundamental in so many aspects of the game, from combat to puzzle solving. So I very much disagree with this, but I understand what he's going for. The odd thing is that certain areas seem like they were designed for the old style and now rendered completely pointless. The worst instances are platform segments where Mario needs to jump on a red platform and Luigi follows suit on green ones. Yeah, he's talking about the numerical patterns that you have to follow. Once you've moved Mario where he needs to go, you just twiddle your thumbs as Luigi does his part automatically. There's no fun in watching half the puzzle get solved by a computer, especially when the series was traditionally built on gameplay that made most of having two equal characters at your disposal. There are even segments where he will actively work against you, where when he needs to step on a number paneled in order, but Luigi bafflingly doesn't want to step on the number before you've stepped on yours. This leads to completely contrived, unbelievable sequences where you need to beat out your own partner so he doesn't fail the puzzle for you both. I disagree with this because the puzzle isn't designed for you two to work together in that way. It's designed to be a timing puzzle. So the way it works is that Mario will go on panel 1, then Luigi will go to panel 2, then Mario will go to panel 3, and before you get to panel 3, Luigi will wait there, and then you have to get to panel 3 before he can get to panel 4. So it's a timing mini game basically. So I think he just really hated this puzzle sequence. Well, it's not even a puzzle, it's more like a time trial. Like if you look at like a time trial, that's what it is. It's less bothersome. Like it's the idea that, hey, you have to get to your number before Luigi gets to his number. And it's very fast paced. Like I don't know why he's saying it's slow. Like I never had to wait there until Luigi got to his number. In fact, it was more or less I had to be quicker than Luigi. So I think he was just really angry about this sequence and hated it. One of Brothership's new main mechanics is called Luigi Logic, but it's essentially just a lengthy animation where Luigi has an epiphany that had to sit through a double-digit number of times across the campaign, generally in results in Luigi just telling you how to progress, often using bros moves like turning into a UFO or just rolling into a ball, or worse, he just does it for you. Brothership feels like stuck between adhering to an old style and trying something new, and it fails at both at landing comfortably in the middle. There are some classic feeling puzzles where the brothers actually work together, but they're generally very simple, boring setups revolving around basic objects like carry this here, hit that button, and it goes back to basics but never moves beyond that. I mean, the Luigi Logic thing is just a fun, quirky gem. It's just like, hey, Luigi's thinking about a solution. He has the solution, and then he tells Mario about it, who they both then have to work together in order to execute the solution. Like, for example, the UFO he uses. Luigi is like, hey, we can glide across this, but I need your help. And then Mario's like, okay, what's your plan? Like, they do it in Italian gibberish, but I think it really showcases how they work together. Luigi comes up with a plan, Mario has to understand its plan, and they both have to work together to execute it properly. This works in boss fights, it works in just everything. So I disagree because it really highlights how they work together. Like, it's always been that way. They would come up with solutions and then they both have to work together to execute it. So I get what he's trying to say. Like, it's very casually put in, but it highlights what Mario and Luigi are about. That they always have each other's backs. That no matter what, that they're always on the same boat, and they always need each other in order to solve and save people who need them. The one piece Luigi Logic excels is in Brothership's great boss battles. The combat as a whole is awesome. The ideas Luigi comes up with during the big encounters, like a nearby fountain to knock one of the earliest bosses, making the most important fights feel like apparently grand. Like the mindless puzzle solving and exploration, there are surprisingly some really challenging fights, including one or two I had to retry after carelessly choosing not to heal, which was a welcome obstacle. If you don't want a challenge, there's an easy mode, though it's confusingly gate-kept behind failing a fight 2 times in a row before you are able to lower the difficulty. Then after a specific battle, the difficulty returns to normal, and if you run into another boss that gives you trouble, you have to lose twice again before it lets you change to easy mode. I played on standard difficulty the whole time except for the purposes of testing out easy mode, so it didn't really bug me, but it's a bizarre choice that feels at odds with Brothership's apparent obsession with making everything otherwise you never feel stuck. I guess it's just to show that you can do things, and if things get too tough, here's an option to make things very easy. And I can tell you right now, the easy mode makes things way, way too easy. Like, basically, you would have to try in order to fail if it's on easy mode. But Yeah, I'm all open for the idea that you should have the option to choose whether you want to play on easy or standard difficulty. I have no problem with that, and yeah, I do agree with the fact that you have to wait 2 battles that you've lost before you can choose it. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's a good criticism, but I really disagree with the idea of that Luigi is turned into a full NPC. I feel like they were just trying to make him as more or less his own person rather than giving full control to Mario. Turn-based combat is Brothership's one consistent bright spot, and while it's more akin to Superstar Saga's basic approach than the crazy screen-stealing Luigi airy attacks in Dream Team, it's honestly everything I wanted from a revival of this series. Mario and Luigi fight with their signature jump attacks, hammer, and combination of new and returning bro attacks, which are flashy special moves that can deal damage if properly timed, all the right button presses. The battle animations are fantastic and feel like ideal transitions of Superstar Saga's 21-year-old sprite work in 3D, and combat is mercifully the place where performance issues are the least noticeable, as battles rarely suffer from frame rate dips. I'm surprised he hasn't mentioned the whole they make you use A in order to choose Luigi's attacks, because that really is the biggest issue I have with this game. Learning enemy patterns from Brothership's large roster of dangerous foes is always satisfying, as you have to memorize their tells to figure out when to hit the dodge button during their attack animations. One of my favorite enemies is the Snaptor, a bird that picks up one of the brothers before flying at one another. You have to listen for Mario and Luigi screams to know if they need to jump to counterattack the Snaptor, or if it's going to try and bowl you over with your rolled up brother. Each enemy has its own patterns like this, and it's exciting whenever you run into a new bad guy for the first time, and to its credit, Brothership's leveling is nicely paced, where I always felt like an appropriate level to take on the bosses as long as I was clearing out the enemies on the main path. I agree, yeah. As long as you fight all the enemies on the main path, you'll have enough experience in order to take on whatever challenges there is. The game also gives you an indicator what level you should be, so if you need to grind, you can. I did wish that you could bypass weaker enemies. Like, I really wish that more RPG games that have random encounters would adapt the Persona aspect. Like in Persona 5, once you reach a certain bond level with Ryuji, you can immediately take out enemies who are far weaker than you. Like, basically they're nothing to you. Granted, you can turn that off in Persona 5 Royale, which was a welcome addition if you need to collect certain personas, but I wish more games did that. Like, if an enemy is so weak, you might as well just like let them kill you. There's also no superstar, which I found really annoying. The superstar from Mario RPG, where you can just kill a bunch of enemies and go on a power craze. Yeah, I really wish the game had that. Of course, the battles are so guilty of fumbling Luigi's role, I bet for not nearly to the same extent as the exploration. He still performs all the combat actions with the B button, but now you explicitly select his moves with the A button. Thank you! Like, what the hell? This may sound like a nitpick, but trust me when I say, as someone who's been playing Mario and Luigi RPGs for over 20 years, it legitimately took me hours to rewrite my brain to select Luigi's attacks with A and then swap over to B to actually do it. It is a confounding decision that tries to solve problem that didn't exist, while also going against every prior Mario and Luigi has played. He's absolutely right. Like, that is a major issue. If you've been playing these games as long as I have, you instantly hit B whenever you see Luigi, and there have been so many times where I would mistime attacks or not hit the right button. I'll be like, I'm pressing the right button, and then it's like, oh yeah, it's A. Like, I don't get why. The smartest new wrinkle in Brothership's combat is the battle plugs are equipable modifiers that impact Mario and Luigi's power and defense and more, comparable to if Paper Mario let you swap out badges you were wearing at the start of each turn. Want to attack a whole group of enemies at once? Equip the Kaboom attack battle plug to deal minor damage to every enemy adjacent to the main target, or if you want to deal extra damage to one target, the surprise iron battle plug lets you drop a spike iron ball on the enemy you attack. To make things even better, some bonuses chain together. If you have these battle plugs equipped at the same time, you can drop an iron ball on every enemy impacted by the shockwave of damage. Many battle plugs work together in smart, surprising ways. It's one of the only areas of Brotherships that doesn't spell everything out to you and allows you to piece together these powerful combinations using your own logic. No, it doesn't. It actually tells you this stuff. There are literal tutorial messages that tell you this. So he's wrong about that. My main annoyance with the battle plugs, however, is that each have limited numbers of uses before they need to recharge, and the only consistent way to kick off the recharge process is to exhaust them to zero. It can lead to awkward scenarios where you have to pick 2 or 3 using a battle plug left with no way to spend it before it goes into a major battle. It's as if you needed to let your iPhone completely die before you could plug it in, and it completely feels clunky. It feels a little clunky. This mechanic makes the battles themselves some of the best in the series, and it's a shame you have to sit through the rest of Brothership to play them. He's being really extreme with the exploration examples, but he's absolutely right about the battle plugs. Like, I was really annoyed about the fact that there would be situations where I'd be like, okay, I'm about to get to the boss. Oh, wait, the battle plugs that I want are not available, so I have to go back and just, like, fight enemies or exhaust all of the certain charges in order to get them to recharge again. And then you have to fight more battles. Well, not battles. You have to go through turns. They recharge based on turns. But even then, I get what he's saying. I wish there was like there is a block that restores all your HP and BP, which is what you use for bros attacks. I wish if you did that, it would replenish all your battle plugs automatically. And they can place that in the same areas that they already have them in the game. Like, they're usually placed before big boss fights. So, just be like, all battle plugs have been reset. Or if you go back to your home area, there's a rest stop in the main hub area. Just say if you rest, all your battle plugs are restarted. So he's absolutely right about that. But also, I guess you can abuse it because the battle plugs can be extremely powerful. But I think they could have done it that there could have been a separate block that resets your battle plugs. Either way, he's right about that. But this guy really hates all the other stuff about Brothership, which isn't bad. And even though the combat is the best part of Brothership, it still wears thin before the end of the adventure. Without going into spoilers specifically, the final third of the campaign is a complete slog that adds nothing of substance beyond retreading the mediocre exploration and puzzle solving of the first 20 hours. Brothership keeps stringing me along and running into circles to the point where I felt like it was disrespecting my time. I would probably have left it a much more positive impression as of whole if it ended at the 25-hour mark, because even if the combat started to feel tired and repetitive as I was going through the motions trying to reach the conclusion. He is right about that. Like, there is a point in the post game, like you think you beat the final boss and the game has an entirely new section. Granted, this is where the game gets really dark and very mature. Like, it's, I would say, one of the most mature and kind of nightmarish Mario and Luigi games I've ever played. Like, even Mario games, like, it gets really dark at the end of the game. Granted, it's a concept that has been used in other games, like the very underappreciated Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, the game. But trust me when I say the final part of this game is one of the most interesting parts. But he's absolutely right when he says that it is also the breaking point, because it basically involves you having to retread the entire game in a giant fetch quest. And I'm 100% certain there are going to be many players who get to that point and they're going to say, I'm not doing this. I'm done. Because he's right. By the time you get there, you think the game is done. It's the best part of the game, but it's also the part where it will probably break a lot of players. Mario and Luigi Brothership is an incredibly disappointing return for the RPG series that I've always loved. I disagree with that. I still think Paper Jam is the most disappointing version of the installment in the franchise. Apart from the combat, it fundamentally misunderstands its own past success and completely fumbles Luigi's role in puzzle solving and exploration by making him more of a pain than a partner. Dude, no he doesn't. Like, I never felt that way about Luigi. Yeah, if you get him caught on a environmental hazard and he has to rush towards you, you can't move forward until Luigi gets within vicinity of you. That did get annoying. But I think he's being way too harsh about it. Like, no, they're trying to make... I felt like they were trying to make Luigi more independent by making him his own person because, yeah, the other games you controlled him, but he was more or less an extension to Mario. In this one, I felt like he's his own person. He operates under his own, operations. He has his Luigi logic. He can deal with puzzles in his own situation. Did I wish you could control him independently at any time? Yes, but beggars can't be choosers. They tried something different, and I think they did a pretty good job with it. Like, yeah, it's not going to win everyone over, but I think he's being way too extreme about this. It's not like with Mario and Luigi Paper Jam, to me, that situation, Paper Mario felt like an NPC who was just tagging along. It's not a total disaster, as in excellent flashy turn-based battles are just some of the best in the series I've ever had, but even those somehow managed to wear thin as the repetitive final act crawls across the finish line of this roughly 34-hour campaign. Again, I don't know how he beat it in 34 hours. Like, it took me 60 hours. Like, unless he skipped a large portion of the side content, I just can't see anyone beating this game in 34 hours. Unless he's much better than me, which is probably the case. Which suffers from surprisingly bad performance issues nearly the entire time. Again, no, it does not. Maybe it's my Switch console. Maybe I have a better Switch console. I don't know. But the only time I ever saw a major performance issue was literally when there are too many character models. The Switch has been home to many triumphant revivals for Nintendo, but the Mario & Luigi series has sadly missed the boat. So he gave it a 5. And I think that's a far too little score for this game. Like, at most, I would give this game a 7, not an IGN 7 because that's kind of a 5 as its own right. I would give it a 7 out of 10, like at the highest. Like, I can't argue for Partners in Time, but I think Mario and Luigi Inside Bowser's Story is the top of the franchise. Then comes Superstar Saga, then Dream Team, then Brothership. Then finally Paper Jam would be at the bottom. Like, again, I never played Partners in Time, so I can't argue for that. But this is not as bad as he makes it out. It's like decent enough. Like, I definitely feel like the game is way too stretched out. It's like a Plague Tale Requiem. It's way too stretched out. And I would say about 20 hours of this game could have been cut. I know that seems like a large cut, but if you played this game, you know what I'm saying. Like, a lot of these side quests could have been cut. The Monster Mania challenges, which are these combat challenges, I don't know. It depends on the player. Personally, I didn't like them, but I can see how people would enjoy them. But I never used the tactics that I learned from those combat challenges ever in the game. Like, I literally never used them. And there are optional boss fights, but they're just harder versions of the baseline bosses, which I'm fine with because they did add enough challenge to the boss fights and new dynamics to their combat patterns that they definitely made for fun encounters. Granted, they're just faster and they add more defenses, but I thought they were enjoyable. I did wish they gave better rewards. That's the thing. A lot of these side quests give you very bad rewards. They just give you, like, items you can buy from the vendor. Like, if they gave you, like, beans, which you use to increase your stats all the time, I would be more forgiving of them because they would actually be tangible rewards. But those are given very rarely throughout the game. But I agree with a lot of things that this person says about the review, but I think they really just hate the fact that Luigi isn't an independent character and the fact that you can't control him all the time, and that he really hated that panel puzzle a lot. I don't get why he hated it, but everyone has their own taste, but I thought they were alright, and there were a lot of decent situations where Mario and Luigi worked together in these independent aspects that worked for the game's themes. Like, I do like the fact that they tried new things. Like, you can't keep doing the old thing or you get stagnated. Like, you become Call of Duty, which is ironic because Black Ops 6 is actually pretty decent. It's pretty fun. But, that's what I think. I think this game deserves a 7 at most. Like, it's not the greatest Mario & Luigi game, but it's also not the worst. Like, it definitely has pattern and length issues, but I think it's a good return. Like, if this is your first Mario & Luigi game, I would say you should play Super Mario RPG Remake instead. Like, if you had a choice between the two, definitely play RPG Remake first. Like, this game is more or less for someone who wants a very old school RPG that is pretty meaty. Like, if you're looking for a game that will literally last you for a few weeks, this is definitely a game, and it's fun. Like, I will say, like, at the end of the day, I had a lot of fun with this game. I think it's really, really good in the sense that it does what it tries to do. It tries new things, and even though it has its issues, I don't think I don't think it deserves all the negativity that it's getting from this reviewer. Like, he has a lot of good points that I like, but I really feel like he was unnecessarily angry with certain mechanics, and I felt like it was very vindictive. But that's how I read it. But tell me what you think in the comments below. Love to hear other people's opinions. That's it from me. Goodbye.